Mothers always have one priority set no matter what species of animal they are. What is on top of their list of important things? Well, that would be their babies. Animals find a partner and have a baby, putting its wants and needs first. But animals that have been held in captivity often face a lot of troubles. They are born naturally with wild animal instincts, so when you place these animals in a domestic setting, it gets troublesome for them to adapt. A tigress that was living in such conditions did not know how to care for her babies called Kai and White. Therefore, a Russian couple had to take charge as their parents. So since we all know that wild animals are born with wild instincts, they often find it hard to cope with their environment if it's kept in a domestic place. When this tigress had her cubs, she wasn't able to give them what they needed. Since she was not raised in the wild, the two rare white tiger cubs were having trouble in life. A Russian couple who handled tigers heard about this tigress, so they decided to jump in and help. So for a tiger not to grow up in the wilderness would naturally feel a little off. And yes, these two tigers certainly did not get to spend their lives in the wilderness. However, since these humans were now taking great care of them, it was not much of a problem. However, was this going to last? Just to look at them was a blessing because these cubs were absolutely adorable. So what happened as the cubs started growing up? Since they were lucky enough for the Russians to take interest in raising them, the two felines were not missing out on anything their tigress mother would have given them. They've now turned 3 years old and are now fully mature. Since they're undoubtedly beautiful, they have a huge fan following on Instagram. Their human parents would often post photos and pictures of the two gorgeous cats for people to see. But it was not always like this. There were a lot of obstacles. Their tigress mother didn't know how to take care of her cubs, as she'd been held in captivity and didn't experience life in the wild much. She was not giving the necessities these babies needed, so something had to be done. The cubs went on to receive a lot of attention and admiration for their sheer beauty, but there was something about these cubs that drew the Russians to take care of them in the first place. So about 3 years ago, the two adorable white tiger cubs Kai and White were born at a zoo. Right from the time they were born, these two cubs faced a problem, and just a few moments after their mother gave birth to them, it was clear that the cubs' health was not ideal. In fact, there was a very huge problem. Their mother was just not into taking care of her babies. It was unlike anything the zookeepers had ever seen before. The tigress was just not into her babies, like she didn't have any interest in her cubs whom she just gave birth to. The tigress was not concerned about them, didn't care to even feed them. So the people working at the zoo had to do it. But since they were not well trained and educated on how to, they didn't do a good job, and the two cubs were on the verge of dying. Since the baby cubs were not getting the proper care they needed, they were slowly withering away. Kai and White were slowly losing their fur, and their poor health was rapidly getting worse. Their condition did not seem good at all, and the zoo was now caught in a dilemma. They had the choice of letting these precious cubs die or to just make a call to Yevgeny and Mikhail. They were two Russians that were tiger experts. So the zoo had no choice but to ask for help from the Russians. After receiving their call for help, the couple took the bald cubs along with them to go home and care for them. They came quickly as they knew how fragile and tender baby cubs are, and so they learned that the poor baby's whiskers had been badly damaged and that they were suffering from a serious allergy as well. So when they took charge of the cubs from the zoo, Mikhail and Yevgeny weren't sure how to keep the babies as pets. They knew that these were not domestic animals, that they belonged to the wild. The couple knew just what to do with them. They knew how to look after them, how to properly treat them, and how expensive they are to handle. Animals like these take a lot of effort and money to be taken care of. So the couple was not sparing anything at all if it meant saving the baby cubs. They were in critical condition, so Mikhail and Yevgeny weren't taking any chances. It was fortunate for the babies to get help when they needed it most. In order to rehabilitate the brothers, the tiger experts did all they could. After giving so much effort, the results were slowly starting to show on the animals. But what happens in the future? Since the Russian tiger experts came in time for the little cubs to be saved, Kai and White managed to pull through. It was all due to the extensive efforts and constant attention that these tigers are now alive and healthy. The two loving human parents are indeed responsible for this miracle taking place. They would feed the cubs their milk, give them their baths, and anything a cub would ever need. And as we all know, wild animals should never be caged, nor should they be kept in a domestic home. Ordinary folks should never take in tigers or other wild animals just because they want to or feel like it. The couple revealed in a later interview explaining that ordinary people should never keep exotic creatures. It takes a lot of money and expertise to raise them, so normal folks could never and should never do it. If you are not an expert in raising these wild animals, you shouldn't even try. It could be very dangerous for both parties if you're not like Mikhail and Evgenia. The two of them each have experienced and handled hand-rearing of cubs. They already have experience with other tigers like Kai and White. They already know the requirements needing to bring cubs like these back to health. So since the Russian couple has had a lot of experience raising needy cubs in the past, Kai and White were not a huge challenge. And since they bounced back to health, you can agree that they have done an amazing job. They now gave the two dying cubs a new chance at life. The two white tigers have come a long way from the time they barely had fur and were at death's door. The Russians were good at their job, bringing back the cubs to health, and for a very good reason. It turns out that Mikhail had begun caring for tigers about 17 years ago, so he's had his fair share of tending and looking after sick and dying tigers. His fascination began when he first saw a guy from a circus walking his tiger in public. He wanted to make a career out of caring for these magnificent creatures then and there. He'd been in love with tigers ever since he was young, so learning about them and how to look after them came easily. And after meeting his wife Evgenia, the two shared their love for tigers that they've both made a profession out of. She became his partner in crime, and the two of them have been saving, treating, housing, and also training tigers. They've turned many tigers to act like well-mannered felines. The two of them weren't just lovers of tigers. They actually wanted to do everything they could do to help them. Mikhail has dreams of one day establishing a tiger reserve. He had good intentions as to why he wants to start this also. He wants this reserve to be a place where all abandoned tigers can live. He wants to be able to nurse the cubs in need and to let them live in a habitat as similar to their natural home as possible. He keeps this as a future plan that he's currently working towards. His love for tigers has stemmed since he was a young boy, so he wanted to do everything and anything he can to make it happen. He is still collecting resources and working towards building the future for the tigers in need. After being rescued by the Russian couple, Kai and White have become quite famous. The rare white tigers are now insta-famous, and the world can't seem to get enough of them. They have a massive fan following because, let's face it, they're magnificent to look at. These cats eat up a lot of meat and would roll around and play in the grass. Their photos and videos have garnered much attention. They were not the only cats that Mikhail has taken care of. In fact, he revealed that the majority of the tigers he's taken under his care have been abandoned by their moms that live in zoos. These mothers don't know how to fend for their kids, nor do they know how to properly care for them. He knows that human care is the only thing that can save them from dying. And it turns out Mikhail and his wife are not only looking after just tigers, they've even helped out with and cared for several other animals too. These animals were born at the zoo and were in dire need to be hand-reared. Since their mothers aren't equipped to look after them, they need the attention and care from the humans as they're the only ones capable of doing so. In fact, there's a long list of Michael's work and help with such animals. He's been involved in rescuing exotic pets from people who've taken them as cubs and were unable to give shelter, care, or feed them any longer. So since the couple had seen so many of these animals that people unknowingly bring into their care, what recommendations do they have? They have advice for people to never adopt a wild animal as a fancy pet. Although the Russians have helped the two cats get healthy and fit, there are many who still had something to complain about. Even though they looked happy and healthy, there were a few people who were still upset when they saw the cats in captivity. There was a popular Reddit thread that was dedicated to the story of White and Kai discussing the handler's intentions. These people were concerned because they felt like these felines belong in the wild and shouldn't be kept by the humans. The Reddit thread was under the topic, "A reputable rescuer would let wild cats live in big enclosures, think Big Cat Rescue in Florida, and does not make them live in a home and do tricks." And this was not all there was talking about these beautiful tigers. As we all know that white tigers are a rare find, it wasn't a surprise that Mikhail's tigers were getting a lot of attention. They were able to draw a wide range of TV shows and even photographers were interested in working with them. He claims this was not really an issue because he said things like these don't actually hurt the tigers or the people involved. And this was actually a win for them because the tigers they have raised have actually become a source of income too. After the tigers gained fame, they've allowed him to rake in some money from all the publicity they got. Now Mikhail can pay for the expenses that he had to spend on them, like buying the tigers food. A 1,000-pound tiger eats 33 pounds of meat a day. Some people were defending Mikhail, and in case you want to see these tigers in action, you can always look up their Instagram account. Even Mikhail's Instagram account has a lot of them in it. If you scroll through, you can see that he really does care for them and that he does regular photo shoots with the tigers too. There was a Redditor who explained how he first thought this was some sort of show-off from his cats. He thought the shoots and the photos were just to show off that they owned an exotic wild cat, but soon realized this wasn't so. He was already passing judgment on the couple, especially on Mikhail, but it was soon flipped. He then learned that the couple was actually very rich and that they didn't need to show off at all. They were actually just in love with their tigers. The Redditor was honest about his review and was pleasantly surprised to see that the cats were actually very well taken care of. He wrote, "What I found was quite surprising. He's very, very rich and does like to have big cats to show off. He's also very knowledgeable and passionate about their needs." He could see that Mikhail was actually doing them a favor. And so, after realizing that the tigers were actually benefiting from the couple, he quickly changed his views on them. He even added, he doesn't run a sanctuary, however. These two tigers were not the only ones that Mikhail wanted to help save. As we'd mentioned earlier, opening up an actual tiger sanctuary is Mikhail's future dream, so we hope he can fulfill his goals. Now that he'd been so open about how he treats his cats and what he's done for them, people have realized that this Russian man is actually doing a lot of good. He's offering the best life that a hand-reared animal could ever get. In the wilderness, the two cats would have died by now, and the Russian couple plan on giving them ample space to play around soon. He does have them socialized as pets, but he's definitely not your standard I want a tiger kind of guy, the man that was the defense for Mikhail had also said. And there's so much evidence that the fluffy cats are happy and healthy under the care of their human parents. However, there are often times when their wild side comes out, and people remember these are wild animals. Mikhail's videos are good evidence that they actually need special care, that they still possess wild instincts too. A good example of what they do would be that his wife and their son look after the tigers that are below the age of 1. They can only look after tigers that are younger than 1 year old. It's like kindergarten for them, and right after that, Mikhail takes charge. Kai and White have now been taken care of by human beings, so they're in no way capable of surviving in the wild. The environment they've been raised in is not ideal for them to live off in the wild. They now have nowhere else to go, and Mikhail is the only person willing to spend his time, money, and land so that the felines can live a normal, healthy life. Kai and White have now become like family to the Russians who've taken care of them. These magnificent cats are still a member of the most endangered species in the world, so they're in desperate need for the help and any care they can get. And from the videos and photos that have been taken by Mikhail and his family, these tigers are actually spoiled brats now.